Welcome back, you filthy exiles. Yes, it is a Christmas party tomorrow, and I bought a really cheap Santa costume. This is not a gimmick for the video. I just wanted to test it out, and I thought it'd be fun to record as Santa Claus. Who doesn't want to do that? Not the first time I've done it on the stream, won't be the last. Anyway, Talkative Try had his time with Jonathan today, where there was another interview conducted. And we got another batch of information that's come out. Also, there was another update on the X or the Twitter, however you want to refer to it. So anyway, we've got some more stuff to talk about. And in good fashion, after this video, I'll also be working on a user guide or a new player guide that'll get you started in the Path of Exile if you're a new player, newly introduced and coming into the game. Anyway, let's get into the video. And similar to the structure I did in the last one, we're just going to keep this quick fire points around about 10 minutes and basically blast through. Anyway, let's get into the video. By the way, if you want to see me dressed as Santa Claus more often in the next month, definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel. I don't know anyone else who's doing this right now, and I do feel like a bit of an idiot. I'm probably going to look like a bigger idiot tomorrow when I go to work, but you know what? Whatever. Anyway, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first point that was mentioned is new player onboarding is going to be a huge focus in Path of Exile 2. This is obviously a massive issue in Path of Exile 1, which deterred a lot of players. And looking at it being in, the top 5 of global bestsellers, this is something that GGG is definitely investing in. Some of the examples are tutorials built into the actual skill system itself in the game, as just one example of this being done. Okay, so the next point is around the ascendencies not being shown on the character creation screen. So this is a feature that is shown or is used in Last Epoch. It's actually pretty useful because you can drill into the character and see what their skills are later down the track. This is actually not something that's coming in, at least in the early access, and Jonathan advised that it could be something that comes later on down the track. So during the EA, balancing is obviously a big issue, and this is basically where they're going to intervene in the EA is where there's totally busted things happening. This would be like just builds that shouldn't exist, or like examples in Path of Exile 1 where overleach was so powerful that it overleached infinitely and basically you couldn't die. That was a pretty crazy one. It'll be the really broken interactions that they'll be nerfing on the fly. And fixed straight away. So, the other one was in Path of Exile 1, where you could 6-link squires. That just shouldn't have been a thing. Those will be the things that they'll be patching out early if there's any issues. And guaranteed there will be. Like, with the amount of content we're looking at, there's 100% a chance that that's going to be a reality. As far as big content updates, this is going to happen in large batches. So, as opposed to, like, putting out incremental hotfixes, incremental updates, things like that, they're going to compile these in as like a big update every 2 to 3 months during the EA, with the intention of this hopefully being wrapped up by the very end and one last big patch before the 1.0 release. So this will just be less disruption to players over the EA period, and will allow you to test more. And yeah, it's just overall a good approach. You're going to get a lot more when there is a big patch and it goes down for a bit. There's going to be a big patch of information, and that's going to hopefully be a benefit to you and also not frustrate the player base. The other major one here was you can not currently switch ascendancies. So you can respec the nodes within the same ascendancy, but you can't switch to another ascendancy on the same class. Now, this is something you could do in Path of Exile with the lab. At any point in lab, you just do 40 points, you respec out, and then basically switch the ascendancy. In Path of Exile 2 right now, you can't do that, but they have mentioned that they are open to feedback about this. It's very likely they'll revert this decision. I, for one, think you should be able to, because maybe you don't want to be a Titan, maybe you want to be a Warbringer. It'd really suck if you get to the end of your run, you're like, oh, I want to play a different ascendancy on the same class, and then basically you can't, you got to re-roll the whole character again. This is probably a decision that would peeve off a lot of players. Next one is unarmed attacks are planned. They're just not going to be in the EA. For anyone who's acquainted with Path of Exile, this would be like things like face breakers and stuff like that, or hollow palm is another example. There's a lot of animating work they mentioned that would be in this process, so it's not as straightforward as you'd think from an animation standpoint, at least. But yeah, it will come to the game eventually, just not at the very initial onset of the EA. Weapon-specific passive points, and this has got to do with weapon switching. cannot change Keystone points. So that would, their comment is that would just be too broken. Like, you imagine you could switch from CI out of CI just at the click of a button. Would be pretty wild if you had the right weapon switch set up. So yeah, no, that's not going to be a thing. Alright, so overall passive skill points, we're looking at 122 passive skill points up front. So yeah, that's basically, yeah, pretty consistent with Path of Exile 1, basically. The other one will be, there will be no one button respec. So this used to happen in standard mode where you could just like respec your entire tree all at once. That's not going to be the case. You're going to be forced to pay for every single node. And this is consistent with GGG's design choice because you really, like, you don't want to have a one button respec. It takes away the value of having to put time and effort into your decision making and the cost that comes with that. So I'm not actually negative to this. I think this makes it more important that you figure out your problems as you're doing your build and your configuration, as opposed to screw it all up at the very start or midway through and then just hit one button, reset the whole lot. And a lot of games do like one button respecing and stuff like that, but this is just not that type of game. There is a bit of weight behind your decision and the time investment behind that to be able to resource it as well. And it is like everything in Path of Exile, there is always an upside and a downside to every decision that you make. Okay, so the other big one is the use of meta skill gems. So this would be like cast on Ignite and things like that, right? They're not going to be able to be mixed and matched with ascendancy skills. They feel so essentially the meta gem and the ascendancy skills are separate skills in the skill tab. You can't combine them, but you could support them with any regular gems, right? So there are some elements of this that I'm like, oh, maybe it would be really cool if you could. But yeah, ultimately, this is their design choice. I'm not negative to this at all. It just means you got to hit the button. You can't automate it. But yeah, anyway, okay. That's fine. I'll deal with that. That's all good. So the next one is you can use multiple meta skill gems. And these are like your Cast Wind Ignite, your Cast Wind Stun, your Cast Wind Freeze. There will be a spirit reservation cost to this, and it will increase, obviously with the more support that you put on it and whatnot. But if you can balance that cost, yes, you could multi-stack meta skill gems to have like automatic trigger setups, which was something that I was planning on playing with anyway, and it's good to see that that's going to be in the game. They also mentioned around getting one shot. So one of the big frustrations in Path of Exile 1 is you'd be on a random spot on the screen and then bam, you would just get clapped by one shot from like 20 kilometers away. This is going to happen according to Jonathan. It's due to the lack of game testing, and that's inevitable with the amount of combinations. There's just not enough time to be able to test everything that could go wrong or that could happen. They don't want this, is what they've stressed, but as soon as they do get notified about it, they'll be looking to fix it. They've made the comment that, yeah, you're going to have fun in hardcore initially. So, and we had this conversation in stream, like maybe playing hardcore is not the best idea to do on the release of the EA, but more power to you if you want to go off and do that. In relation to biomes, so we're coming back to this discussion around biomes, map bosses will be tied generally to the biome. So that's something that we sort of knew, which means, and they said in the last interview that was done yesterday or the day before, that, basically what that means is map bosses will be target farmable based on the biome, or biomes will allow for target farming, which means, I actually really like this mechanic. This is Delve in a nutshell, and I'm all for it. All right, so Waystones. Now, there was conversation about Waystones. They're essentially just maps, right? It's the same system of maps called something else. They'll go up to T15. For those who don't know what T15 means, is you start at T1 or Tier 1 difficulty, and it goes up through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 being the hardest. However, if you can corrupt them, you can get them to Tier 16, which was the standard tier in Path of Exile 1. It actually got as high as Tier 17 in Path of Exile 1, and that's probably going to be something they do later down the track when power creep becomes a reality. In relation to the trade site, this is planned for day one. So yeah, we're going to get day one trade site. I'll be doing a video after around all these mechanics for new players. So if you don't know what that means, I'll explain all of that. So stay tuned. On the front of Geforce Now, this is planned to be supported from day one in the early access. So for those looking to use Geforce Now for being able to play Path of Exile 2, yes, you will be able to as well. Now, the most fun one, and I'm definitely going to hit hog up for this one because I want blood, is basic PvP will still exist in the game at a really simplistic level. and you will be able to fight your friends every now and again when you need to settle those disagreements that only, you know, thrusting a sword or an axe into each other can resolve. You will be able to do this. So, you know, basically we could have a fight night or a fight club in Path of Exile 2, which would be pretty wild, and you know what, it's not a bad idea. Okay, so as far as runes, runes are designed to be simple and quick problem solvers for resists and things like that. Soul cores are going to be entered into the game as well. Soul cores are going to be a lot more interesting and dynamic, and I guess we'll just have to find out more about soul cores when we get to the game on the 7th or the 6th. Sorry, for those of you not in Australia. Okay, and the last point from the interview is there are no vendor recipes in Path of Exile 2, as there were in Path of Exile 1. Effectively, vendor recipes have been moved to NPCs or benches, so it's more accessible instead of having to have this, you know, niche understanding of these mechanics to be able to get access to these very secret recipes and things like that. I like this. I didn't really use recipes. You really didn't use recipes at vendors unless you were like playing SSF or hardcore SSF or something like that. So I'm not negative to this change. I don't think it's a bad thing. Also, like, Chaos Recipe really just wasn't worth it. And generally in Path of Exile 1, bots would usually exploit these mechanics more than players. Okay, so also on the PoE X, we did get some updates around different skills that are coming out. So Archmage is coming back into the game. It has a reservation now, and it's referred to as a buff skill. So for those of you who didn't know what it is, basically it means you can mana stack. And mana stacking is super powerful. So spells gain 5% of damage as lightning for each 100 mana you have. This used to synergize with items like Ivory Tower and was absolutely super powerful on the Mjolnir setup, basically. And Mjolnir is coming back into the game as well, as we already know. So yeah, this is going to be really interesting to see some of the builds that are going to come out of this. Beyond that, we've got this really cool skill called Wild Shards as well. So basically, they have a 20% chance to fire 8 additional projectiles in a circle, it's a support gem, but it just looks really cool. Okay, and we also got a look at Sigil of Power today as well. So basically, this is where you stand within a radius, you drop the Sigil of Power, and then the more that you cast within that Sigil of Power, the more spell damage you get per every cast, depending on how much mana you burn through. So yeah, this is going to be really powerful. Also, the Viper Goad Chiming Wand that they showed is absolutely cranked. So +5 to level of all lightning spell skills, which for a bloody staff is insane. I think previously it was like +2 with all the support crafts that you used to have on it. And basically like just straight up flat everything, damage, you know, 26% of damage is extra lightning damage, and like overstats of 119% spell damage. And if you're playing this on a mana stacker, it's just totally nuts. So this would be something that you probably play on like the Monk or something like that. But yeah, some of the skills in this game, or the Sorceress, some of the skills in this game are just going to be totally whack. And gear, that is, too. Okay, so I hope this video was a good summary. Just in case you're like me, you just got home from work, you don't have the patience, or you have the patience of an ant. Maybe you don't, you just want something short while you have your iced coffee before you move on to the next thing. Anyway, if you like this sort of content, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. Don't forget to follow the X, the Twitter. They're the same thing. And also the Twitch. I stream on both Twitch and YouTube now. We're back to basics of where we first started. And there's the Patreon down below too. If you feel like you want to support the channel, you can either be a member or join the Patreon, either way. But anyway, I'll talk to you guys later and have a good one.